Welcome back to the Board of Clackamas County Commissioners Policy Session for 11:30 on this June 29th. Gary, what's up?
Thank you, Chair Smith. First session this afternoon, 2020 Annual Report, Americans with Disabilities Act, Transition Plan for Public Rights of Way. Mike Besner, Assistant Director of Transportation and Development, will present. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Gary. Chair Smith, Commissioners, thanks for having me. This is an annual report to report on our progress in complying with the ADA on our pedestrian and bike or pedestrian facilities throughout the county. Back in 2017, the board adopted our first ADA transition plan, which is a federal requirement to have to get us from non-compliance with everything to compliance. And it's basically just a roadmap to get there, and it's a slow process. Clackamas County, like every other jurisdiction that I know of, most ramps were out of compliance back in 2017, mostly due to time. Some weren't built right, but the majority were built correctly when they were first put in, and then the regulations changed over the years, or they were built before the act was passed. And so this is our attempt to bring them up to standard. And it is a requirement of federal law.
Since it's a requirement, is the federal government paying for them?
No.
So we're paying for them from what fund?
They either come out of the road fund or whatever fund is funding the project that is rebuilding them. So it could be grant. We do get grants, but a lot of it is road fund.
Okay.
There is a requirement that every time we pave a road, that we have to fix the ramps as well. So, which results in most of the ramps that we've been repairing right now or building. So this is our third annual progress report to you. This one's a little different because for the first time we actually did a project only to upgrade ramps to comply with ADA. They weren't associated with another project, and that was our Oak Grove Boulevard project. And so we completed it, and so that was our first one, and that replaced about 28 ramps on that project. Our next big one that we already bid is, and it's going to get going this summer, is on Sunnyside Road. And that one's a bit of a monster, but we have to do it because next year we're planning on paving Sunnyside, so we have to fix the ramps. And it's actually going there in 2 different contracts. These projects are not inexpensive. Rebuilding a ramp is time intensive for design to make sure you get it right. It's labor intensive for construction and inspection, because they are very complex. There's about 30 different points on a ramp you got to measure and get right to comply with the law. It's very difficult. I am also happy to say that we had a meeting with the city of Portland this year, who has a very efficient program. They have way more ramps than we do that they have to fix. And they have put a lot of resources towards it that we're not necessarily going to do because they have employees solely dedicated to ADA ramps. But we're going to try and adopt some of their practices that streamline the design process and streamline the construction process so that we can get more efficient on it. It's a problem with every agency right now, figuring out how to do these.
Our
But
cities, I just question, Mike, before you continue.
Yeah.
Are cities required to do the same?
every public entity in the country is required.
And some of our smaller cities, remote, rural towns, I think this would be a real economic strain for them.
I would agree with that.
Wow.
Yeah, and I know for a while even ODOT struggled with it, and it's why they would make certain decisions not to pave certain roads because they couldn't afford to fix all the ramps. Now, since then, ODOT has actually been sued, and their settlement, they have a schedule over, I can't remember what it is, but maybe 15 years to fix all their ramps. So they're investing lots and lots of money. The City of Portland had a similar arrangement. City of Bend had a similar arrangement.
Wow.
So yeah, it is very difficult, certainly for smaller entities to do this. And when we do road transfers, as you might be noticing when we come to you with them, we don't just have here's a road payment to take the road from us, but we have, here's a money for the ramps, so that we don't stick. The latest one was Canby. We get it, this is a liability we're transferring to you, here's some money so that you can deal with it in the future. So, the Sunnyside Road project is going to replace about 78 more. And that'll be this summer going into next spring. Just to give you an idea how much these are, you're probably not going to believe these numbers. But on Sunnyside Road, which are the most complex ones we're going to have in the county, I mean, they're very large, pretty involved. They could be about 35 to 40,000 per when you consider design, right-of-way needs, and construction. Now, the good news, again, is those are going to be the most expensive ones we ever do, but they're almost never going to be less than 10 to 20,000 each when you get everything, when all is said and done. So that's why we want to try and work with the City of Portland more and adopt some of their procedures to make it less expensive. Some of these go in with development, and so our development inspectors are out there to make sure they get built properly the first time. The contracting community has had to make a lot of adjustments because this hit, and they were used to just throwing them in, and they were careful, but the tolerances on ramps were such that they could do everything right and still do it wrong, just based on contract tolerances. That's all our practices have changed. We mentioned it in the report, how we've tightened up ours, much like other agencies over the last 2 years, where we've changed our design so that we allow that tolerance. And if they build it off just a little, it's still going to be compliant. So we're on the right track. Right now, we haven't scheduled another ADA ramp-only project, but the biggest reason is we are spending a lot of resources keeping ahead of our paving projects and replacing the ramps the year ahead on those. And so we're making progress. It's going to take a little while, but we're definitely getting a little better at it, too.
Good.
I don't have much else to present on it. And you're not required to approve it, but we are required to report to you. Oh, the other one, the Clackamas Regional Center is the other project going on that's fixing a whole bunch of ramps with urban renewal funds right now.
Okay.
It's part of that project.
Well,
But,
at least we have urban renewal money to do that.
Yes. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, I don't really have a question, I just have a comment. I just really appreciate the update and the diligence in working through this. I know that, I mean, it seems like a lot of money, $35,000 to $40,000, but if you think about it as, well, this is one's access through a community and their mobility, whether it's using a wheelchair or a walker or a stroller, you know, moms with kids and just trying to get from here to there. When you don't have access, it is brutal and really not safe because people go around sidewalks and go on the street and can create real safety hazards. So I really appreciate the diligent approach to follow through and getting all these done and reporting back, and because it makes a difference. I'll never forget, and you all may know Angel Faulkner, who when she was a young mom and trying to maneuver through the streets over in Milwaukee and the lack of access to sidewalks, it was such a challenge. That's why she decided to run for city council, because it was just so hard to move around. And we all know that, I think back I went to a walkability seminar with folks, a team of people from Clackamas County, to talk about just how important it is to allow movement through the spaces that we create, that government creates, because it's related to chronic disease, and it keeps people healthier if they're able to get out and move safely. So it's all within those values, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other comments for the presenter? Seeing none. Gary?
There's no decision point today, so that was just informational, so
Okay.
thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much.
All right, I don't see all our staff here for the next session, so either we could use this time if you'd like to jump ahead to the 3 issues remaining on the issues list, which are the Economic Recovery Resolution Draft, discussing a fireworks ban or not, or Commissioner Communications.
Let's do the fireworks ban.
Okay?
Maybe you folks got an email from Leah Horner at the governor's office. And I'm just going to read what they have to say, in case you're interested. Commissioners, wanted to flag that we are getting a lot of questions on banning fireworks. The governor only has the authority to ban permits for large firework events that are professionally put on. The governor has no intention of banning those, since the bigger risk of fireworks is around individuals setting them off in non-professional settings. Banning or restricting around individual retail sales is at the discretion of the county commission. Let me read that again, I kind of blundered it. Banning or restrictions around individual retail sales is at the discretion of the county commission. Please let me know if you have questions or need messaging around the firework risks this year. Gary, do we have any of the agencies reporting back to us?
Yes, we have all the answers, and I unfortunately told staff this would be at the end of today, so if they're listening, come on down. So what we've learned is the fire districts do not declare, they are not able to ban. It's cities or counties only. So as a county commission, you do have the authority if you choose to do so. You would normally do it by ordinance, which, as you know, there's a 2-ordinance public hearing process, or you could declare an emergency like you did with our COVID-19 declaration. I've done a quick check-in with the city managers within Clackamas County, and as of right now, only 2 cities are doing a fireworks ban. They are Tualatin, who's already done it, and the city of Milwaukee is about to do it today or tomorrow. Lake Oswego, Sandy, Wilsonville, Gladstone, and West Lynn are all considering doing a ban. Malala, Canby, and Happy Valley are not doing a ban. So even within the cities, they're kind of all over the place. Our sheriff's office has reported they are concerned that if you do enact a ban, they will have little to no time to enforce it. It will put a great burden on them to do that this weekend.
Yeah, I
So-
just talked to the sheriff, too.
You have a lot of options here, but you could do it if you chose. There are ramifications to doing that. Certainly an education effort is what everyone's doing, and the fire districts are doing as well, is to advise people, please be safe and careful. It's your call what you'd like to do. Nancy, I kind of gave a quick update on all the email traffic, but I don't know if you just heard what I said, but.
Well, I think we all the commissioners have been getting emails that we need to ban fireworks. I just want to say, people need to be smart, and they need to be safe. I don't know that it's really fair and prudent that this Board of Commissioners passes an emergency policy and then expects the sheriff's office to take action on public policy. That really rubs me the wrong way. There is a civil responsibility. If you're going to let off a fireworks and it goes into your neighbor's house and burns down the house, guess what? You're going to be in trouble. If your fireworks goes into a hayfield, burns it, or goes into a timber stand and burns it, you will be criminally and financially held responsible. And I will cite many examples. A perfect one is up the gorge several years ago when the kids were throwing fireworks off and it burned the gorge. And those teenagers, especially the lead instigator, his parents are, oh my gosh, we're talking tens of millions of dollars of lawsuits and jail time, and that's very real. So if you want to be in a Yahoo and thinking that, this is a Wild West in Clackamas County, just know there are penalties if you, do harm to others' property or even your own property. I have trouble initiating a ban right after we're getting out of COVID. And I think you can see from the governor's email, she may be on the same page. Now, in Clackamas County, the Malala 4th of July Buckaroo celebration was canceled this year, and that was a huge fireworks demonstration. But those fireworks went off over the dirt arena. And the chances of them going out and possibly landing on somebody's roof is nil. And they had fire trucks standing on duty, ready to go at a moment's notice if anything got out of hand. And they were professional fireworks people. I think, this is just my personal opinion, if we ban fireworks, we're going to see people out there, oh, well, we're going to show you. We're going to go do them anyway. And I know personally a lot of people will think that way. So, commissioners, I will open this up for discussion on what you think you want to do. I see some commissioners in the queue. Commissioner Fisher, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. I just was showing Gary, came through on my Facebook, Portland Fire and Rescue initiated a ban on fireworks. And they say, please do not call 911 to report firework use. Use 911 system must be safe for reporting only active fires and serious medical problems. But it was the Portland Fire and Rescue that initiated the ban. And so I'm just curious how Portland Fire and Rescue can initiate a ban and then our fire departments cannot. So I'd like to answer that, but I would think that if our fire, Clackamas Fire, TVNR, and other fire would like to do that, I would hope that we would support them in that. Just, it's an education piece.
We can issue an education statement, certainly. Nancy, do you have a comment?
I was just going to say that the Fire Defense Board, it's not that they can't, but they need to do it by ordinance. And my guess is Portland Fire started the ordinance probably weeks ago, where none of our fire districts have done that.
Okay.
Ordinance 6-1. And I'm not opposed to issuing a statement around education and civil liability and the proper handling, therefore, having water, da-da-da-da-da. But Commissioner Scholl.
Yes, thank you. Legal fireworks in Clackamas County has been being sold for the last couple of weeks in many, many outlets throughout the county. And those are legal fireworks, and they are typically not particularly dangerous. What is dangerous is the illegal fireworks that we see in Clackamas County. And there are tons of it every 4th of July that are lit off in violation of the law. And so if we ban the safe fireworks, we will not be able to enforce that. It's going to happen anyway. What we need to do is put the word out that if you light off illegal fireworks, the big skyrocket, the big stuff, and you, A, you're breaking the law, B, if you start a fire, you're in deep kimchi. Okay? That word needs to be put out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Commissioner Schrader.
Well, I better put this on. I do think that we could do a public service announcement, would be my suggestion, talking about the dangers and with the extreme heat. If we can't do, I'm torn because part of me would say, hey, just tell people don't do this and ban it, but I don't think it's enforceable. That's the issue. But at the very least, we should have either you, Commissioner, or whatever public service announcement out there. Have our PGA, if they can do it pretty quickly, Gary, really put it out that to be cautious and preferably do not use fireworks. My preference would be to say we strongly, saying to people, if you can avoid fireworks, you should not, but if they're going to do it, be safe. I don't know.
Commissioner, are you finished?
Yeah.
Yeah. Commissioner Fisher, are you in the queue?
Yeah, so I just am likening back to the Eagle Creek fire that was so devastating. And I understand that people can pay for it, but not all the money in the world could that person who threw that firework into the forest ever recover the millions and millions of dollars of damage. And that was really significant fire. That was our first real, there's a lot of smoke in the valley. This is very, very serious. So I would actually, thinking about all of the moving parts and also seeing all the jurisdictions that are banning fireworks right now, I would be in favor, I would love to hear what our sheriff department has to say, but in just saying we do an emergency declaration, ban the use of fireworks, but please do not call 911 if somebody's using fireworks, save 911 for. But it's serious. It's that the heat, it's serious, and you should, fireworks are banned. It's probably the best way to communicate to the public.
Commissioner Salas.
Yeah, well, I don't think we're going to be popular with this one, and I don't think that's our goal. I think it's really about the risk that we're putting our communities in danger. So I watched one of my neighbors about a few homes down, watch his house burn down from a firework when I was a kid. And, people don't really do, sometimes people push the limits. if you take a legal firework and you throw it in the air and it lands on someone's roof, the house burns down, that's what happened. That's what happened. But no one knew. No one really knew it. It wasn't on July 4th. I think it was days leading up to July 4th, and no one really saw, not very many people saw it, and they just figured it went up on the roof and it got up in the cedar shingles, and long story short, but after the fire, we found out that oh yeah, well, I saw so-and-so throw it. So, locally, in my neighborhood, I know that someone's bushes caught on fire, legal fireworks, but, people taking the fireworks, they're thinking they're completely out. They didn't really wet them down, and they put them in the garbage can, and then the side of the garage goes up on fire because, that heat was there. There's things that happen with legal fireworks. Is it worth the risk? I think there's parts of Clackamas County that are more urban and less likely to have problems, but we have a substantial amount of this county that is, essentially closer to a tinderbox than it's ever been before. And Chair Smith, I would say that, as much as Estacada and Malala were impacted, I would feel that you probably might be somewhat torn on this, knowing the impacts, knowing what everyone went through, and all it takes is one mistake.
Well,
Just one.
I am
don't know what
torn
the weather.
on this.
I don't know what the weather conditions are going to be on July 4th or the day before or after, but I do want to say that I think Commissioner Schull touched on it, making the distinction between the legal and the illegal. People start lighting off fireworks days before and days after July 4th. And some of them are illegal. Quite a few of them are illegal, right? So it really becomes an issue of social responsibility. There's no practical way of enforcing it. I mean, we got to just put that out there. There's just too many people, too many homes, not enough, whether it's law enforcement, there's just not enough people to respond to those unless there's something blatant or someone's at risk. But we've seen people get injured from fireworks as well. That's a common thing. But I'm compelled to do something. But I kind of really wondering if we ought to look at, I don't know. We don't have very much time. But how do you to say that if you live in an urban area, there's not very much trees or brush, and you got a safer environment, you got legal fireworks. That's one thing. But if you're out in the country, or you're near a hillside or whatnot, and you got brush and trees all around you, that's dangerous. Imagine living in a neighborhood like that. Imagine living in a neighborhood, that one wrong move is going to set a fire. I'm compelled to do something, but this board, we need the complete
Paul,
support of this board to make something happen.
What did this board do last year? Did
We
you
didn't
take
have this.
action
We
last
didn't
year?
have this
We
dry
had
condition
COVID
last year.
Oh, what was that?
We had COVID last year.
People still let off, but people still let off fireworks.
And they did. And I don't believe it was as dry last year as it was. Now, 2 years ago, we approached this subject because it was really dry.
So 2 years ago, what did this board do?
We did not do one.
You did not do?
We did not have a ban, primarily because of a lot of the complexities, working with CCSO, knowing that they couldn't enforce it if we did do one. The fire districts were in the same place. It's like they didn't get the ordinance done in time. And as far as I know, none of the cities did it that year either. Maybe Happy Valley, but I'm not positive about that. There may have been one city.
Well, it sounds like that we're in the same predicament as we were 2 years ago, and the issues are the same to me. Now, if we were to do an emergency declaration and pass it this Thursday to ban fireworks, my personal opinion is that would not have any more force and effect than it would a very strong statement along maybe what Commissioner Schrader wants to do. And I think people need to be reminded of, again, the civil responsibility. And just because we were to institute a ban doesn't mean they're not going to do it. I mean, we can make the harshest ban. We can shut down retail outlets from selling it, and which I do not support whatsoever, because I think that we're unfairly singling out those particular outlets who have gone to great investment and expense to buy and sell fireworks. I think we will have greater success in an education effort, a very stern education effort. You know, if you burn down your neighbor's house, be prepared to pay. If you're going to burn down a forest, you know, you gave up your birthday for the rest of your life, that type of thing, and be very direct in our statements. I think maybe when we look at the responsibility that we have, you know, as a body who passes ordinance, we think, oh, we are so powerful, we pass an ordinance, therefore people are going to, ooh, Clackamas County passed this ordinance, I better not do it. I don't think that has much force and effect as an education effort, and either way, we are running out of time. So what I will do, I will defer to my commissioners. Does anybody want to make a motion on anything today? Because if you do, it needs to be done really now, so staff can prepare to write up something for Thursday, or we can make a statement today that PGA can start writing this afternoon, that we can start putting out Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, through the weekend. And those, I believe, are our two options. Do I hear something from any commissioner on a preference?
Well, I'd be prepared to do something here, but I'm going to couch it another different. The other one I forgot to mention is that I think that some of these sanctioned professional fireworks displays, I have typically confidence in them that I don't want them thrown into the mix. For example, if they take a lot of precautions, they have the fire protection gear around, they cordon off a lot of area, they take all the precautions. I think that those shows are places for people to go that want to see fireworks, that can celebrate the 4th of July. So, I'm going to take a stab at it. I'll just take a stab at it. I move that we direct our staff to draft two resolutions, one resolution being a ban and the other resolution being an advisory.
I'll second that.
Get there.
Motion has been made by Commissioner Stavis for staff to draft two resolutions, one being an outright ban, the other is a recommendation and an education piece. Okay, Commissioner Fisher has seconded that motion. Now, Stephen.
Yes.
What good does it do to ban illegal fireworks? Isn't they're already illegal, so we're already making them more illegal?
That was not my motion. Yeah, I understand where you're going with that, but I should say that's not my motion.
The motion has been made and seconded. I'm asking him a question. I'm in the discussion part of your motion. The question for Stephen is, what sense does it make to ban illegal fireworks? It's like we're saying we're making murder more illegal or something like that.
That would be redundant. It's already controlled by state law. If you're talking about fireworks that are prohibited presently in Oregon.
Yeah, so.
We do have legal fireworks, so in Oregon as well.
So are we going to ban legal fireworks?
I think that's what it would do, right?
So we're going to ban a legal activity. Is that what the motion is, Paul?
I know exactly what I said.
Well,
A resolution to ban fireworks, that would include legal and illegal, even though you're right, it's redundant. But, I think if it's done with, both of them need to be educational, honestly.
So, okay, we can do an education piece on both. So you want the motion to state we ban both legal and illegal fireworks. Now, what about retail sales?
That's why I mentioned at the very beginning, this is not going to be easy.
Well, I know. Well, the thing is, we need a point of clarification on this, Commissioner. If you're going to ban the use, then you need to ban the sales as well, which I personally am not willing to go to, but it's your motion, so you can do, whatever, and then we'll offer it up for a vote.
Yeah, well, I think that's something for us to determine how much detail you want in there to direct staff, but I wasn't going to, typically, we don't make motions with a lot of detail in them, right? So I think that's really.
Well, actually, we make motions based on a piece of information that's presented to us in writing. So what we're kind of doing right now, I guess, is wordsmithing at the 11th hour on this. But I want to know what is the best we can, what's going to be presented to us on Thursday. I'm going to let you think about that because I have another commissioner in the queue. Commissioner Scholl?
Legal fireworks have been sold for weeks. People are getting ready to do their 4th of July celebration. Any regulation, decree, or whatever you call it, cannot prohibit or stop stupidity or the lack of common sense. And any regulation or decree that can't be enforced should not be written in the first place. I encourage us to look at putting the word out, public service announcements about the grave concern about fire, but not to limit the sale of legal fireworks and the use of legal fireworks.
Okay, so what you're saying is legal fireworks are okay and retail sale of legal fireworks are okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'm getting that in my mind. Commissioner Savas, you're in the queue.
Yeah, I just want to make one clarification. In Oregon, you're not allowed to sell fireworks until either June 26th or June 27th. So the sale of legal fireworks just started over the weekend.
Okay.
The other thing I would say is my intention and hope that we would work in cooperation with our emergency responders, most especially the fire departments, is to figure out what they could recommend. Maybe there's, again, the other motion, I want to focus back on to the advisory, the second resolution, and that is what are some words in an advisory one that it's not a ban, would be more of an advisory, and how can we work messaging with law enforcement, the media, and everything else, because both of them need to have that educational element to them. So they're both are on the table. Both motion was both. So let's make sure we talk about both.
Well, go ahead, talk about them.
Yep. So that's why I'm asking. I'm
Gary, I'm gonna
throwing
have
that out
you-
for fodder right now.
Gary, I'm going to have you opine on this.
Yes, Commissioners, I'm going to ask you, just please make a decision one way or the other, because this motion, respectfully, you're passing the decision to Thursday. I know you want to see something in writing, I get that, but I think there's too many complications to an outright ban, as you're talking about right now. I'm really concerned. I mean, I know the Captain O'Neill's here, but he's not here for this item. The Sheriff's Office is not here. This is putting burden on them to enforce this, and I told you, they do not have the resources to enforce this. So in a way, if you do the ban, it's an unenforceable act, and then what will that impact be? We can do an educational effort right now. In fact, we've already started that earlier this week. So if that's respectfully, one way or the other, please don't ask us to do both, but pick one today, and we'll
Well,
do
the
it.
motion has two elements in it. Is that,
That's the standing motion, so you need to,
Okay.
need to vote on it.
well, it's still not clear to me on, I think our greatest impact is to come up with a very strong statement right now and get it in motion and get it on and flood the news media and anybody who wants, any of the commissioners who want to do interviews or, just cite what happened last year in the fires, although the forest fires didn't start from fireworks. And the fire that we had, the little 4 or 5 acres up yesterday did not start because of fireworks. Although weather conditions can lead to anything, I suppose. I'm having a lot of trouble with this. So, Paul, would you restate your motion for clarity?
Well, the motion was to direct staff to draft 2 resolutions, one being a fireworks advisory and the other to be a ban for consideration on Thursday.
Okay, so both of those will have to be voted on separately on Thursday if it passes today, right, Stephen?
To be effective for the 4th, absolutely.
But they need to be voted on separately.
Yes, it sounds like one's advisory and one is actually going to be some type of ordinance or declaration, correct?
Any other comments on this? Yes, Commissioner Fisher.
So I'm just kind of Googling along, and what my goal in supporting Commissioner Savas's motion is that we are included in the ever-growing list of jurisdictions that are banning fireworks for this 4th of July. And it's growing, because this is so serious, and it was so hot when we were in this heat dome for 3 days, and now I'm looking here, Oregon City, we're going to be up to 91, 93, 91 on the 4th of July. It's pure sun over the weekend. I'm very concerned about how dry it is. Very, very concerned. This is not a normal time or normal situation, and I think a very strong statement to recognize the very dangerous risk of fire is very, very important, and advising people very strongly. I also think we can do what Portland Fire and Rescue did, and to tell people not to call 911 if someone is lighting off fireworks, save 911 for actual fires or emergencies.
Well, then, I'm further confused. If we're going to pass a ban, which has the force and effect of law, and then people are breaking the law, and then we're telling them not to report to 911, to me, that's totally counterproductive, isn't it?
Well, that's what Portland Fire and Rescue did, and I think they got their message out pretty strong. So I do not have a problem giving that message at all.
I can't even begin to wrap my head around that one. Captain O'Neill, do you have a comment?
Yeah. So as far as the enforcement action goes, around the 4th of July, we get bombarded with fireworks complaints. We're busy handling other priority calls, disturbances, especially with heat as hot as in the 90s. As far as when we go out and make contact with folks with illegal fireworks or even legal fireworks, setting them off in a manner they shouldn't be set off in, our first approach is education, to make sure that they're, fully educated on it. If we keep having issues, then it could go to a citation. But this year especially, we just don't have the amount of people to enforce any sort of ban whatsoever.
Beyond the citation, which is more troubling to me, is the civil responsibility that could result in the use. And I don't think a ban is going to stop that, but whatever. Any other comments from commissioners?
Just to repeat, I think we all recognize in this room, I believe, that we can't enforce this, and I think it's just like saying the governor says, everyone should social distance and wear a mask. It's really not enforceable. I'm not sure anyone ever got arrested for not wearing a mask, right? I mean, it's a trust factor, right? It's social responsibility is really what this is all about. I think the messaging is really important, and frankly, giving 48 hours to think this through between crafting the resolutions will give us time to communicate with fire district personnel and give us the breathing space and be prepared one way or another to do something. Mm-hmm. And like I said at the very beginning, I'm inclined to do something. I'm compelled to do something. I don't know what that is, but these are two good options. They're two options, and we'll decide perhaps and learn more about them.
Well, we are doing something, I think. I think we're messaging now, aren't we, Gary? PGA is messaging now. We are doing something, so any further action, I don't know. Okay, so we beat this dead horse to death even further. Let's take a poll on it. Shannon.
Commissioner Schrader?
Sure. Let's do it.
No.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Sorry. Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Chair Smith?
I abstain.
Okay. Here's what I'm going to suggest. I know we finished, but we do have to put out a very strong danger advisory message. Whether ban, no ban, like I said, it's not enforceable. I'm just being pragmatic here. But we should put out a danger, strong advisory message, the things that come on TV that like flash at you, Danger. Yeah, danger. Like I said, that's really what we've got to be doing, because people, like I said,
I need to declare that the motion has passed 3-1-1, and
okay, thank you.
there you go.
Thank
Continue.
you. Thank you.
So staff will prepare 2 resolutions. We will drop every other piece of work and work on this for the next 24 hours. We'll give it to you tomorrow and notice it, and on Thursday's business meeting, that's where you'll have to make the decision which one you want to do.
Stephen, you wanted to say something?
Both.
Stephen
Well, I was
McCourt.
going to kind of repeat what Gary just said. There's two things moving forward. Just wanted to point out that it's not just fireworks that start fires. It's open burns, it's campfires, it's cars without spark arresters, it's cigarettes, it's a variety of things. So if you're going to do it across the board on those types of things.
Chainsaws that started.
Chainsaws, I mean, people be careful with any spark-inducing equipment or behaviors. Across the board, you could public service announcement this strongly. It could be an Amber Alert, it could be something like that.
Yeah.
If you were to do a ban, I mean, I can write it between now and then, it will not apply in any of your cities. It would only apply in unincorporated. The civic infraction charge is $500, which we've already heard. Chances of it being enforced is unlikely. So I'm saying for bang for your buck, it's probably the advisory component is more value than the ban. I will work on both and get it to you by tomorrow, but just be mindful of some of the restrictions you have with an entire ban.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
Chair?
agree with Stephen.
Yeah, you're in the queue, Commissioner Savas.
Thank you. So the other thing I thought of even this morning when I was considering, should there be an action, and we did that this morning, asking the question of staff, what's the role of the fire departments? And, let's be honest. I mean, I think a public figure of a fire chief, or the fire department has a lot more recognition than any one of our faces, okay? And so the power of that would be great if we had the cooperation, if some of the fire chiefs are willing to come up and on Thursday and speak to this, and that could be part of the public messaging. And that's one of our roles. Our roles are really, I don't think it's really, again, it's not about enforcement in this particular circumstance. It's not possible. It's really about the messaging and encouraging people to take the social responsibility necessary to protect one another and families and everyone else. We have that responsibility. To do nothing, I think, is irresponsible at this point, knowing what we know.
All right, I think we beat this enough, and as soon as Stephen gets that out, I urge commissioners to read it thoroughly and be prepared on Thursday to discuss it. Thank you very much. Gary, what's up next?
All right, back to the policy sessions. Next is noise ordinance variances. We have staff from Transportation and Development, the Sheriff's Office, and County Counsel's Office to present. This is a follow-up to a prior policy session. Nate Boderman, County Counsel's Office, Cheryl Bell, Transportation and Development are the main presenters. Please go ahead.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Smith and Commissioners. We're here today to talk about noise ordinance variances. This is a continuation of previous work.
Can you speak more directly into the
Sure,
mic?
yeah, I apologize.
Thank you very much.
I believe we have a perfect PowerPoint up. So as Gary noted, Cheryl Bell, Assistant Director of Development for DTD, and I'm joined by Nate Boderman, Assistant County Counsel. So we have had previous conversation about noise variance requests. The last action on this effort was in November of 2020 in a policy session with the board. But with the changes in the board, staff are here today to see if the current board concurs with previous direction or if you'd like to revise the direction given to staff. We have this brief presentation, and then we look forward to your comments and questions. As we start out, I do want to clarify that in talking about the variance program, we're talking about the process of the community applying for and staff approving variances to the noise standards. This is not about enforcement of the noise ordinance. We are proposing no changes to enforcement, and enforcement remains with CCSO. So next slide. So in jumping right in, the purpose of this policy session is to share background on this program with you, the direction by the previous board and the work done to date on these efforts, and then ultimately we're seeking clarity on how to proceed with this work so we can complete the steps necessary to make the proposed changes. Next slide.
So just briefly to cover some background, since it was the prior iteration of the board that really did the bulk of the work with regards to the noise ordinance. As Cheryl mentioned, on October 1st of last year, the board adopted comprehensive amendments to the county's noise control regulations, which were then codified as amendments in Chapter 605 of the County Code. Most notably, the county fundamentally shifted the way that it evaluated noise violations, really from an approach that required the use of noise meters to confirm whether a certain noise exceeded a threshold that was spelled out in the code, and the shift then to a more subjective approach that requires an evaluation of whether the noise is unreasonable given the context of where the noise is occurring. Those amendments did become effective on December 30th of last year. And while the majority of the policy changes to the code were adopted on October 1st, what the board did was defer further discussion around the process for granting variances to allow staff to continue work on a proposal to address those concerns. And so we had a couple different substantive proposals sort of moving in tandem, both related to the noise ordinance, but really different in subject matter, so to speak. We can go to the next slide. So under the current code, subsection 040 sets forth the general standards for what constitutes a noise violation under the county code. And the code currently provides a process whereby somebody may, or somebody who plans to operate a sound source which may exceed the standards can apply to the sheriff's office. And this request to exceed that standard is what we refer to as a variance. The code provides criteria where an applicant must justify the noise-producing activity by explaining things like the nature of the noise, whether the activity might be a hazard to the public, whether there's a public benefit associated with the activity, whether the applicant has any previous record of compliance or non-compliance with similar type requests. As I alluded to previously, the sheriff's office is the one that's specifically tasked in our code to receive and process these variance requests.
And I'll jump in real quick. You'll see the variance requests to date. This is in the May 4th, 21 issues conversation, staff were asked what was causing the decrease in variances. So we checked with CCSO, and they indicated COVID's definitely had an effect. But also they've been doing pretty robust outreach with customers, sharing what the variance process is and actually talking through the noise standards themselves. And it ends up most people do not need a variance. So if DTD continues to go through this project and takes over issuing variances, we plan to stand up an entire website related to variances so that we can provide the same robust outreach to the community, including our in-person staff.
Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So after adoption of the main noise ordinance amendments that I alluded to earlier, staff came back to the board at a policy session in November to discuss recommended changes to the variance process. And that was based on feedback that the board had provided us. It was based on meetings with the county administrator, representatives from DTD, and the sheriff's office. And what resulted was the recommendations sort of boiling down to three main items. The first of which was to transfer the responsibility of process and review of noise variance requests, to DTD. The thinking there was that DTD has experience processing similar type requests from the public and is really set up to potentially capture a fee to cover staff time associated with this work, whereas processing applications is something relatively outside the norm. I think it's fair to say for the sheriff's office and the patrol division, we were told wasn't set up to collect a fee for the work. And really, given the relatively small amount of requests, as you can see, or that was on the previous slide, related to variances, it didn't make much sense to set up a fee collection and accounting process just for variances. In order to implement this change, the county needs to eliminate the specific reference to the sheriff's office in the code. And again, as I alluded to earlier, the code specifically identifies the sheriff's office as the department that's responsible for variances. So the proposed revision identifies the county administrator as the responsible entity for taking jurisdiction to noise variances, and specifically notes that the administrator then may appoint a designee to assume noise variance responsibilities. So what this does is it would allow for a transition of work at some point in the future without the need for a subsequent code amendment. We'd come in, just have it transferred to county administration, and then at that point it could be administratively delegated at that point. We'll talk about fees in a moment, but I do want to note that part of the discussion that occurred previously around the transition of the work to DTD really was based on an understanding that the move could be made close to cost neutral by establishing a fee to cover the work. So we'll keep that in mind, but we will talk about fees here in just a moment. Let's go to the next slide. The board expressed a desire to see some level of notice provided to the public in conjunction with approved variances. So to address this, the group that I referenced earlier proposed incorporating a posted notice provision in the code. Specifically, what it would require is an applicant to post notice on the site adjacent to the right-of-way where possible, and to provide contact information for somebody associated with the project in the event that anyone wishes to inquire about the nature of the variance. Where the site isn't adjacent to a public right-of-way, the posting must be made in a location on the site reasonably anticipated to provide the public notice of the variance approval. So long story short, this is, it's a notice that we don't typically do with applications, but it would be a physical posting on the site, presumably to give anybody in the vicinity that level of notice that something is happening. The provision would address what we perceive as an omission in our current process, and is really an approach that's been used with relative success in other jurisdictions based on our research. Next slide. Third recommendation revolves around really what's the current policy of the sheriff's office with respect to variances, to only approve variance requests that are associated with construction projects and permitted events, and to deny variances associated with other private events, parties, etc. And while the current variance criteria requires the county to evaluate the public benefits associated with the request, the code doesn't dictate that any particular factor weigh heavier than the others. So the group considered this, and we agreed that the proposals that produce a public benefit are the types of requests that should receive the most favorable reviews. And that there may be circumstances where a variance may be warranted even where the activity purely benefits a private party. We didn't want to discount that entirely, but we recognized that there needed to be some accounting for in priority given to variance requests that had a benefit to the public at large. So in light of these considerations, the group proposes to leave the criteria as is, but to strengthen the guidance in the code in terms of how the criteria are to be applied. So along those lines, we propose language clearly setting out a preference that noise variances that are not associated with an activity benefiting the general public should only be approved in the most extraordinary circumstances. And let's go to the next slide. I'll turn it back to Cheryl.
Yeah, so as we were laying the groundwork for the 3 recommendations that Nate just covered, staff have also identified another potential option that we're bringing before the board today. And looking at the data from 2017 through early March of 21, and that's what you'll see in your slide here, it presents the types of construction variances that were approved through the sheriff's office. So I'd like to highlight the largest category of work that seeks these variances, which is installation of paving, curbs, and ADA ramps. That's the first one on the list. And then if you look down, there's 2 similar categories: signage, paint, bike, and pedestrian lane installation, and then guardrail and bridge installation. In total, these categories represent about 60% of the construction variances. All of this work is similar in that it occurs adjacent to a right-of-way, and we see a key reason to allow this work in off-peak hours, both for the safety of the workers and also for the impact on the traveling public when lanes have to be closed or roads have to be closed to do that kind of work. So that led us to develop this consideration for you today. Go to the next slide. So it's important to note when talking about this that per our code, sounds caused by construction activity are allowed between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. right now. So in considering this large volume of work that's performed adjacent to the right-of-way, staff see we could expand our current code exemptions to allow this work without the need for a variance. This would also lower the number of variances that need to be processed by the county. When considering this expansion, work on public property or in the right-of-way in most cases already has county-required separate permits related to construction activity, and that retains the ability to impose construction activity conditions on those permits. We do this typically to make sure work would not occur at night because we need inspectors on site, and these permitting conditions would allow regulation of that work of when it could occur. So therefore, staff are proposing that the exemption be applied to construction projects that involve work in or adjacent to a public way and that are either managed by a government entity or subject to a separate permit covering the construction activity. This would allow the permitting authority and the contractor to determine times of work, but if off-peak hour work is appropriate, they would not need to seek a variance. So that goes to our next slide. And lastly, for your consideration today is a future discussion on charging a fee for this work. This is being brought to the board today as direction to staff in the November 10th policy session was for staff to research a fee for cost recovery of this work. This is in alignment with the direction from the board that initiatives have full cost recovery and not impact the general fund. So there's a number of things to consider in adopting a fee. First, we're not asking for a fee today. This is being brought forward for discussion only, so staff have direction on next steps, or if the board would like to revise this direction to staff on proposing a fee. Any fee would be related to cost recovery for those physical materials provided to people to do the posting on site and for staff time in processing these requests. This fee only applies to those seeking a variance from our noise standards. It's a fee paid for an exception. So it's not like other fees that are applied generally. It's specific for those people looking for an exemption for our code. And if they choose to if they don't want to pay the fee, they can work within the current noise ordinance provisions. It's also typical for jurisdictions to charge a fee for this work. In reviewing this and doing some comparisons, staff looked at a number of jurisdictions. The cost for these fees varies pretty widely, but in the upper end, they're in the thousands of dollars. If the board wishes to charge a fee for this work, once again, we will bring this in a separate session to the board, but our initial estimates to cover materials and staff time would set the fee between $130 and $200. So that leads us to the options presented for the board today and as outlined in your packet. There's a number of them, and I'm not going to read them all for you because I know you're fabulous readers and we're tight on time. But the staff recommendation today is on the next slide, and it's option number 3. Staff recommend direct staff to implement the BCC recommendations from the November 2020 policy session, transferring processing of noise variance requests from CCSO to DTD, incorporating those new construction standards for work adjacent to the right-of-way, implemented a posting notification, and then developing a fee proposal for future BCC consideration. And with that, that kind of ends our presentation, and we're open to questions and comments.
So Cheryl, are you saying that most of these fee requests for a noise variance comes from government entities in their construction?
They come from a lot of different sources. For the construction, it would come from the contractors wanting to do the work.
Doing work for government entities like installing ramps and crosswalks and guardrails, and that's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
Okay. What about, do we get a lot of this type of activity for instance, residential construction? Is there an issue with that, home building?
DTD currently doesn't manage this program, so I'm not sure of the exact nature of the fee requests that are being presented to the sheriff's office right now. If potentially somebody could apply for a residential construction variance request.
Commissioner Scholl?
Yes, does the sheriff's office currently have a fee that recovers cost of providing variant services?
No, we do not.
Then why do we want to have one for DDT?
Staff were asked to do a fee, to propose a fee for cost recovery for this work to cover staff time and to cover the materials, and that's why we're proposing a fee.
Okay.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, I'm going to give you some backdrop or, some backstory on this. Not a whole lot, but enough to just paint the picture here that we're trying to do. So several years ago when Mr. Don Krupp was the administrator when this occurred, we had a construction company who apparently applied for a variance with the sheriff's office, was granted the variance, and there's a form that the sheriff's office used to fill out, and in there it said, for example, a number of things, but I'll just two of them, what time of day they want, and dates that they wanted this variance. So they wanted it between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. That was the outline time to do this project. And that the other box that they checked was, yeah, they contacted the neighbors, and they checked yes, okay? And this project was right on the right on a commercial property to urban property, so a neighborhood was affected, or several neighborhoods were affected. So what happened is that the construction company started at least at 1:45. That's when the noise actually got so loud that the neighbors got out. So they probably started earlier than 1:45. So they violated their own agreement, 3 o'clock. And so it went on for actually a couple nights. But the point of the matter is they didn't contact any of the neighbors, but they checked the box. I'm not here today advocating for a fee. Recently, someone in my neighborhood had a party, and the neighbor went door to door and said, by the way, I'm having a party. We're going to have a band. It'll be kind of loud, but at 11 o'clock, we're going to stop. It'll be quiet. And they did that. That's common courtesy. Common courtesy. They did. It went beautifully. No law enforcement needed. We maintained. Younger folks, it was great. Worked out fine. So I'm not inclined, per se. There's not enough here to actually make it worthwhile to put a fee in there. I'm not advocating for a fee, but my problem is number 2 with putting a sign out in front that somehow that's noticed. It doesn't have to be a burden upon staff to do that. It should be an obligation that they actually did that. How that's done, I don't know, but it's not a big deal to knock on. I've done it before. It's not that hard to knock on doors. It really isn't. Should DTD staff do that? No, I don't think so. But someone needs to do it, and it needs to be verified that it's been done. I think it's as simple as that. In these rare extremities, is basically just to make sure that people, just common courtesy, quality of life, common courtesy that we do that. That's not uncommon to for other jurisdictions to do. So I appreciate everything that Nate talked about that we have done. We have done a lot of good work on this noise previously, but that's the backstory. I agree with the Sheriff's Department because when this happened, Sheriff Roberts said, we shouldn't be doing this. And he was going up the elevator with him and Matt Ellington and the other undersheriff, who I forgot was, Chris Hoy. And we agreed. I mean, that's just us in the elevator, right? So I agree that it should be transferred from the Sheriff's Office responsibility to DTD. It doesn't fit the Sheriff's Office stuff. And it's not really about enforcement. It's really just about procedural. DTD monitors projects. It's a construction project. They permit it through Clackamas County. They already have a relationship with the county in construction aspects. That we send inspectors out. We do a lot of on-site work. It's just something they ought to be checking the box. And if someone actually, doesn't follow the rules quite, they're going to get a reputation for that, especially if it goes sideways. So I'm in agreement with a lot of this. I just don't agree with sticking a plastic sign out or whatever kind of sign it is somehow that's going to notify the neighbors when it's, I think, far more courteous and effective to simply knock on doors. If they're not home, leave a little piece of paper or sticker on the door. We've been here, here's what's going on. The word will get out in the neighborhood and they'll know by then. Just common courtesy.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. Couple of questions. Why should it be up to staff to do something that benefits the construction company? Construction companies should be in compliance with this and do the work themselves. They should go knock on the door, and they should put up their own sign. I don't know why we're thinking that the DTT staff has to do that.
Well, we've got an ordinance on the books that prohibits a certain level of noise,
Yeah.
right? And so I think there's this tension between recognizing that there's certain activities that necessarily need to exceed that threshold that's been established, and the process to vet which ones are appropriate, right? And so the construction companies, unless you make an outright exemption like we're proposing for certain construction activities adjacent to right-of-way, you need a mechanism to review which ones are appropriate and which ones aren't. I think Commissioner Savas brings up a point. This whole variance conversation was precipitated by a construction project that exceeded the noise thresholds, and there wasn't a way, or there wasn't an effective way, I guess I should say, to vet that on the front end. So that's really what's precipitated this conversation. We're open to other suggestions, but we try to thread the needle between, creating one set of regulations that's going to equally apply to
So
countless
does
scenarios.
recommendation number 3 have a fee increase or a cost recovery method in it?
That's what's being proposed, and again, that's
What?
that's what's being proposed, and that's based on the prior direction of the board. And, again, going back to the threading the needle analogy, we've got this policy of cost recovery.
So why
This is a
isn't this-
reallocation of,
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. I understand that. I think I was hearing a commissioner when we did a cost recovery method. My question is on process, why isn't this fee increase, or whatever you want to call it, come up at the normal course of DTD's business when you consider all fee increases?
it would.
Huh?
It would.
Well, then
The-
we don't
the-
have to do the fee increase today.
Correct. The proposal was direction.
Well, I asked you the question, Nate, and you said yes. In number 3, there is a cost recovery method in that, and there is a fee increase. I asked you directly, and you said yes.
The direction is to come back and propose a specific fee increase.
Okay, so recommendation number 3 says to transfer from the sheriff's office to DTD, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and to consider a fee increase, a cost recovery method for the future, to be considered at a future date, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and maybe, by then we can make it more, the user take more responsibility in
notification of if they're going to make noise or not. Because I think if you're engaging in certain, I owned an inn, and I owned an inn where I hosted weddings on Saturdays in the summer, and we had bands, and we had da-da-da, and I went to the neighbors, he says, look, we're going to have some music playing, and we're going to be dancing, and you're right next to us. And oh, by the way, you're invited to come over and have some booze and some food with us. You're invited to participate. And you know what? If you're going to run your lawnmower, can you not do it between the 15 minutes between 3 o'clock and 3:15 when they're saying their vows? And so that's kind of how you have to handle it. I am not for the big hand of government, with the hammer. On this one, on the previous fire thing, I think there's a way to nuance some of these situations, and we need to relay that to the people who benefit from this, the construction companies or whomever out there is doing whatever. They need to take the responsibility of following the law themselves by going door to door like Commissioner Savas and putting up their own signs with a phone number to call or whatever you guys think the sign should say. That would be my recommendation going forward. Commissioners, any other comments? Are we ready to hear a motion?
I'm going to suggest 2 motions, Chair, so I'm just.
Go ahead, take a stab at it.
So, Chair, I move that we transfer the authority of variances from DTD, from the Sheriff's Office to DTD.
I'll second that.
Okay. The motion has been made to transfer from the Sheriff's Office to DTD. Should we vote on that first and then come back for your second motion? Any comments or questions on that motion? Hearing none, Shannon, Shannon, please call the poll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
Chair Smith?
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Commissioner Savas.
Okay, this is where it gets a little bit harder.
Sure.
So, on recommendation number 2, so I guess the motion is going to be direct staff to craft language that includes posted notification and local resident notification where in places where there are residences nearby. Sorry.
I second the motion. Do we need a clarification on the motion, Nathan?
Oh, just to clarify expectations, so a posted notice, and then are you thinking something along the lines of what we do for land use decisions where we mail notice or a requirement that somebody certify that they have gone door to door in a certain area? I guess I'm unclear on that second part.
Yeah, I would assume the latter, that someone certifies that they've gone door to door.
So you're asking that would be staff to do that, Paul?
No, it wouldn't be our staff. It'd be, well, staff would, somehow it'd be the developer contractor who would be doing that work, and then we would certify that they've done that somehow.
Through an affidavit or something like that.
So, Paul, can you amend the motion to say that?
Okay, so I'm going to start all over again. So I move that we on the notification requirements require posted notice, and that the notification to nearby residents be done by the permittee and verified through an affidavit process.
Nate, is that okay?
We can work with that.
Okay, he's got a thumbs up, and I second that motion. Any other comments or questions on this motion? Okay, seeing none, Shannon, would you please take the poll?
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Anything else, Nate or Cheryl?
The last one's recommendation number 3, and I'm okay with that if I understand it correctly. So basically, if it's for the public benefit, the variance process would go through a different mechanism. Is that correct?
No, it would amend the language to clarify that those variance proposals, that the criteria evaluating whether there's a public benefit associated with the variance request, that would be given additional weight in the evaluation.
Okay. So would that be compatible with everything else we've done?
Oh, I think so, yeah, yeah. I guess the lingering question in my mind is whether you would exempt those construction activities that we talked about that are adjacent to the right-of-way, because that would be a wholesale exemption. That wouldn't need to go through the variance process. So sorry, two issues. I hope I'm not conflating them there. The reason we would exempt those is because we assume there's a public benefit with those construction projects adjacent to the right-of-way. So let me re-clarify, sorry. More directly to your question, we would amend the language in the variance to put additional weight on the public benefit component of the evaluation.
So moved.
Nate, would you restate that, please?
Revise the language in the variance criteria to place additional weight on the public benefit component or criteria.
I'll second that.
All right.
Not sure we need it, but hey, our bases are covered. Any other comments or questions on the motion?
Yeah, so one comment on that for public benefit, and this is a little shout out to my friends at ODOT. So you can argue that paving a road or fixing a road is a public benefit. I would argue that it is. I would agree with that. And when ODOT does a lift, at least the recent one, everyone in our area got a notice in the mail from them saying, by the way, we're making noise between these days and these hours and so on. So they took it upon themselves. I don't think they had to. They weren't required to, but they did it anyhow. But my point here is for public benefit, that's quite different.
Well, okay, yeah, public benefit, or the privates should be part of the permit fee, I would think, from, you know, if you have to mail notice, but we've already kind of said not to do the mail notice. I think all this is very confusing, actually. Any other comments on the motion on the table? Hearing none, Shannon, please call the poll.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Anything else? Nate?
And the second part of Commissioner Savas's point is whether there's board direction to specifically exempt construction projects adjacent to the right-of-way.
Exempt them from the variance?
Exempt them from the variance process.
I'll look to my colleagues on that one.
So we're exempting governments from something that the private sector is not exempted from?
It would be mostly governments. Presumably, there could be private property owners, but
Private
they'd have to
property.
obtain a right-of-way permit to do the work.
I don't think government should be exempt. If that's the question you're asking me, no. I don't think that at all.
So
If
no-
anything,
no
government
action.
should be held to a higher standard.
And let me clarify, the exemption wouldn't apply specifically to government. It would apply to any project, any construction project adjacent to the right-of-way.
And the justification is for the public good.
For the public good, and because it's somewhat redundant, because we already require a permit, and we could impose conditions on the work through the permit process.
Do we have other provisions in our county ordinances that allow for that, Stephen?
Not that I am aware of. It's a carve-out, and I know
I don't
what-
like the carve-out. I think government should comply, if not exceed, the standards we set for the private sector.
Let Nate's point be taken, though, that it could very well be the private sector contractor who's performing this work. It's just work that's deemed to be in the public interest, sidewalks, ramps, guardrails, things like that.
And I probably think since it's a government project, they will be well compensated, right? I think so. I am not willing to go with a carve-out for government. Nathan?
Just add 2 points of clarification. One, we have a rather lengthy section already in our noise ordinance that exempts certain activities, and so this would be added to
No,
the
well,
list. Point taken. But two, this was also efforts by staff to be sensitive to the fact that that the board may not want to charge a fee for these. And so what we are doing or attempting to do is to address the majority of variance requests that are already coming in. As Cheryl said, it's about 60% of the variance requests that are coming in that would be exempted and therefore wouldn't take staff time, wouldn't take an additional fee to process those. And again, in our estimation, those are almost exclusively, these public benefit type projects that are being done adjacent to the right-of-way or under a right-of-way permit already. So that was staff's thinking. We don't have a specific, policy preference one way or the other. This is our attempt to, again, thread the needle for,
Commissioners, does any commissioners have a comment on that?
I have just a question. So Nate, what you're saying is that, one, if we charge a fee, we would exempt it, but we're not charging a fee, so that's moot, right?
It wouldn't be a variance, so there would be no process, there would be no fee. It would just be allowed.
Okay, just be allowed, outright allowed, and that's the carve-out that you're asking. So if we do nothing today, it stays as is?
It would be subject to a variance.
Okay. And it would be it would result in a workload increase by being a variance, potentially?
Presumably, it would be in line with what we've seen from the sheriff's office, the number of, yeah.
Okay, the status quo?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm fine leaving it as is. I do want to just say, so the other thing I didn't say earlier is that this noise thing has been greater than just this whole construction thing. This goes back to the people that were shooting outside shooting. It goes back to marijuana farms with fans. This whole noise thing has been years of work. So we've done a lot of work. I want to just say thank you for all that work and show my appreciation that we have spent a lot of time on this, and I think we're just about at the finish line, if not finished. Thank you.
Okay. Nathan, I don't think that we satisfied your last point you were trying to make. Did we?
If nobody wants to make a motion, then we'll take it as a signal that we'll leave the ordinance as is.
Is there any danger in leaving the ordinance as is?
No, it would just be, again, status quo. What we presume to be the majority of variance requests would remain variance requests.
Commissioners, are we okay with the status quo?
Yeah, if we go a year or two and we have a problem, we can bring it back.
There you go.
That's true.
I'm okay with that, too. Nate, you have one more thing.
May I raise one final issue? Should be quick, but it wasn't in your staff report, but it'll be particular interest to you. Right now, appeals of variances go directly to the Board of County Commissioners. That is highly unusual in our code. We typically have hearings officers here, things like that. Is that something you would like us to adjust in our code, is moving appeals of noise variances? We've never had one, so we've never had to deal with it. But as long as we're cleaning up the code, would you like to send appeals of variances to the hearings officer?
Yes, I think they should go to the hearings officers.
Okay. Can we get a motion on that, just so we have?
I move that the appeals to the hearings, ordinances, or variances go to the hearings officers.
Second.
Motion has been made by the chair and seconded by Commissioner Schrader. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, Chair,
Yes.
so my question or concern, possibly a concern, if it depends on your response, and that is that what's more nimble? Because I know that sometimes if there's a need for a variance, is it faster to get a hearings officer and a thing done, or is it much quicker for the Board of County Commissioners to respond?
I doubt, all things being equal, that the getting on the board's agenda would be faster than the hearings officer, but I'm making an assumption without any real factual, we can provide a process, a specific process in the code. And actually, one of the things that we struggled with was for construction projects, oftentimes you don't know, weeks in advance when you're actually going to need the variance because you're dealing with weather conditions and pouring concrete, and you don't know when it's going to be hot, for instance. And so, frankly, that's one thing that we've struggled with is, providing an expedited route for certain variances. And so we'll deal with that internally and do the best that we can. But
I think at that point, if the Board of County Commissioners were to hear that, it then becomes political and lobbying efforts are employed. And I don't like that type of activity at this level with a hearings officer. It's a little bit different. You really have to present your case according to law and facts, and when you're dealing with elected officials, it becomes a different animal. Nathan, that's why I don't like it. I think it should go to the hearings officer. And there's a motion on the table. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Shannon, take the poll.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Chair Smith?
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Nate, do you have anything else?
by the way, no, I'm done. I'm done.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for your hard work, staff. This was very informative and somewhat difficult, but you helped well. Gary, what's up next?
Next, supportive housing services funding. We have presenters or an update to you on how to fund the Metro Supportive Housing Services measure. Commissioners Savas and Schrader will be the presenters today.
Hey, I'm going to take a quick couple.
Yeah, let's take just 5 minutes for, get some water, and we'll come right back. Thank you. Well, Board of County Commissioners have returned for the afternoon policy session on June 29, 2021. Gary.
Thank you, Chair Smith. Next is Supportive Housing Services Funding Options. Commissioners Schrader and Savas are the main presenters, and staff is in the room to assist if you need it. But please go ahead, Commissioners.
Okay, great. Well, Gary, I'll start and I'll pass it off to Martha. So a little bit of background. As we all knew, when we start working on the budget and the HACC budget, at that point in time, I think we were under the impression that Clackamas County was going to receive at least $24 million on July 1st. And we soon found out that despite projections and communications from I believe a May 18th document from Metro, where they anticipated it being $32 million, they also couched it as that these monies may come in gradually. Just last week, I believe, or a week and a half ago, we learned that the disbursement for July 1st from Metro, instead of being $24 million, would be $150,000. That was a significant difference in the amount of revenue. Of course, before last week, we knew that, and we appreciate the opportunity to work and get the Housing Task Force, Administrators Housing Task Force group reconvened to tackle this. So we worked, and I communicated with, some of us, with other financial staff around the region affected by this, and try to come up with some projections. So number one, the first thing we did when we sat down as a group was we asked, Commissioner Schrader and I asked H3S staff, Jill and Rod, what do they need? What are your needs? And so that was really the beginning, and that was so the bare bones minimum. What do we need to get this, to bridge the immediate needs for funding, and also get started on rolling out the implementation plan, the LIP. Secondly, I mentioned that we were working with the financial officers to kind of understand ideally what they were going to be doing and what they saw as projections. And we found out through Elizabeth, her role mainly, that we were pretty well on the same page with the other jurisdictions. We wanted to make sure we avoided scenarios in which that would or could result in cuts or cancellations of contracts and service delivery interruption should we have started out too quickly and not did in a gradual ramp up. Very concerned about that. And also want, of course, provide a steady and consistent ramping up in service provision to assure that service levels and funding levels remained in balance. So that was our goal. In all the work that we did, we looked at different scenarios because at that time we hadn't had the projections, a better idea of the projections, and we used Metro suggested we use the Portland Energy Fund tax charting where they showed different percentages coming in, and we coupled that with the dollars and the revenue, and we have a rough idea of what and a way to scale what future projections could look like when they increase, if we're going to get to the 32 million mark in year one, or a 12 million mark, or 32, whatever the number is. These numbers will, as they come in, the monthly disbursements, we'll be able to gauge where we are in that scale and anticipate what that's going to be. So what we have come up with is that we're going to do a quarterly review of the 26-210 disbursements to analyze tax revenue trends. As disbursement trends demonstrate reliable increases in revenue flow, the task force will consider a recalibration of service levels and potentially bring a recommendation that increases supportive housing services funding levels to the BCC for approval. So essentially, we're starting out with a $10 million number. We're programming cash flows and an advance from Metro in order to start that. We're going to take about a $3 million advance at first to get things started, and then in about September, October, we look at those disbursements and say, hey, it's looking good, or it's looking flat, whatever it may be, and then we'll come back and say, okay, we need to go to the next level, ideally, that the revenues will look higher, and then we'll ramp it up a notch. And we may need, at some of those points, if the ramp up needs to be much higher, to take another level of that advance from Metro to get that next level started. So we will be constantly monitoring that all the way through. And so I think we've got a really good plan. We work with Rod and Jill, Rod Cook and Jill Smith, Emily Klepper, Gary Schmidt, Nancy Bush, and Elizabeth Comfort. And I think we got a pretty good plan. I think that we can reliably start off these funds and start off the programming. And I'll stop there and let Commissioner Schrader fill in the blanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the principles that we were using to kind of get this far. As you can see, basically programming, it was an approach that basically allows previously mentioned programs to continue uninterrupted, rapid rehousing, Metro 300, all of those things. So we did want to start by making sure that those programs that were initially at risk were not going to be at risk. So that was one of the principles. And basically, the whole principle is building the infrastructure foundation, kind of that lane over time as the dollars come in. And we do anticipate that HAC will be able to basically get some RFPs out, not only to some of the nonprofits, but also ramping up with about 2 to 4 staff. I don't know, I don't remember that number. Paul, does that sound about right to you? It's
Yeah,
2 to 4,
we have
I think.
4 hired now, and we'll gradually
And then
increase it to
gradually
4
build
more,
that
a
up.
total of 8.
We also wanted to make sure that this process was based on solid financial scenarios. So that was one of the reasons Elizabeth Comfort worked with 3 of her counterparts in the other, or 2 of her counterparts in the other 2 counties, looking at cash flow projections and, what this might mean for the dollars. And, we do have a commitment of not less than $10 million for the first year. Okay. We are, as Paul said, going to be monitoring it pretty closely quarterly, so if we can move more quickly, we will. That's kind of where we are with this. Initially, we thought about taking $3 million from Metro. We can go up to $5 million if necessary. Okay. Now, we will have to pay that back at low interest, I think 0.6%. Help me with numbers, Guy.
Yep, 0.6.
0.6, which is actually pretty good deal. Obviously, we'd rather not, but, have interest. But even if we borrowed it from our general fund as a loan, we'd be actually paying interest on it to get it back. So we'd rather at a higher rate, according to Elizabeth. So that was kind of interesting to find that out. So in any case, I think it's pretty solid because it gets us going in a way with the money that we can really legitimately have at hand, okay? And allows us the flexibility to really, if we get more dollars, to really kind of build that infrastructure more quickly, which is what I think we'd all like to do. So that's
I have a question.
That's it, and I hope we can answer. Okay.
The 0.0% for Metro is a surprise to me. I thought that it was going to be an advance on future revenues and not a loan repayment program.
I'm happy to respond to that, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, you're actually right. It actually is an advance, but the advance will be, for the dollar amounts that are advanced, there will be a 0.6% rate on that because we're asking for an upfront advance. And basically what they're going to do, they're going to take future revenues, ideally, and deduct what would be the amount, which would be basically a payment. So we really wouldn't see a payment. We would just see a reduction in future revenues. So in that way,
Reduction of 0.6%.
0.6% is what the Metro will charge us, yes, for that advance. Emily, is that correct? Okay.
It's not ideal, but it's, I think, I will
Well,
say.
none of this situation is ideal, and I think you both have done good work on presenting this program to get off the ground.
And we did even put the possibility of contingency. However, I will be honest with you, Gary has strongly advised against that. And if we were absolutely, wrestled to the ground, we could. But again, I'm personally worried that, we need to maintain that at its current level because of the uncertainty of wildfires and other emergencies we're facing, so.
Well, the other two counties don't have the wildfire situation,
No, they don't.
right at their feet, that we do. And so I think our responsibilities are more broad-based.
So that would be a very last ditch effort if we actually, as I said, so right now we're not. It's in the body of the narrative, but we're not recommending that we move in that direction at this moment with
Okay.
contingency.
Commissioner Fisher, you're in the queue.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Smith. Thanks, you guys. It's always good digging into the weeds on this stuff. Couple questions, and this may be something that we have to get later, but one thing that I'd be really interested in, and maybe you have this, but I do know from being involved with the local implementation planning, that the ramp up was going to be, not all at once, it was going to be a continual process anyway, just because you're building a new program. And I am just interested in knowing what the quarterly costs of the original plan would, for it's 24 million or 24.5 million, what that would have been in the first quarter, the second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. And I know that is somewhere, but I haven't seen it. So I would really like to know that, because I'm guessing that with this plan, we're not far off from where we started. Is that,
Yeah,
did
so-
you guys look at that?
So let me just put everything in a context of time here, and that is that I don't know I never saw, Commissioner, this task force never saw any kind of projections that staff had previously done to implement the LIP. So I don't know what that looked like. And I think that, as I understood it, they were trying to piece that together. We talked about FTEs, what their goals were under certain scenarios, heard different numbers, 8, 10, 12 different numbers that they were looking at doing. So I don't know what those projections were, but I will say what we did do, we did talk about what if the quarterlies, the quarterly analysis look back was shaping up more like 12 million or 14 million or 24 million, whatever. So what I got confidence in, that staff's prepared, if the revenues look good, to implement, and we know what their needs are. So this time and opportunity has given us, and them especially, is giving them an opportunity to actually put all that together. So I think this is kind of one of those scenarios where we're kind of building the plane as we fly it, so to speak. And that's what I kind of saw. So I got confidence that they will be building the staff necessary and will be prepared come September, October for and ideally, I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that the revenue, that the disbursements coming in will be higher, and then we can step it up notch by notch by notch, if you will.
Yeah, I'm really, I don't know how I'm feeling these days. I participated in the Metro Oversight Committee yesterday and was really digging into the audit that, in a lot of depth. And there is a very large, I can't even fathom it, but it's like the difference between 14 million and almost 40 million of possible revenue scenarios for us in Clackamas County. And it's just very difficult to figure out how to plan a program when you have just such a huge delta. And my question, I've reached out to Dan Fowler, who's been an amazing voice on the Oversight Committee, and we are really trying to dig in and figure this out because it is not clear. But when will we know? Like who are doing the calculations, and when will we get more information? Because they think it's probably going to end up being 32 million from what Metro is forecasting, but the auditor's report has a very different number. So I don't know what is most reliable. That's a question that I have. It's my first question. Gary, I don't know if you know the answer to that. And then my next question is when will we get more information as to what and when is being forecasted?
Well, I think it's going to come from the CFOs. you
Yeah.
know, and working together. That's where that information is coming from and what they seem to find agreement on. And I think they found agreement on, it's not gonna, I don't think anyone's projecting that's looking at the numbers really close that we're gonna see or realize 32 million between now and July 1 next year. I mean, I could be wrong, and I'm happy to be wrong. I would like to be wrong. I'd like to see it be that big or larger, but I think it's going to be much less in the first year. And that's why I sent an email, I forgot what day it was, but I asked them, and I even talked to President Peterson about that too. It'd be great if our CFOs could work together to sort out just what you're asking. What can we get a better idea of what it is? And we've gotten cooperation, and they are working together. They're the experts. So we're relying upon them to tell us. And so we'll know much more. And again, all of us are going to be gauging that disbursement of tax revenue. And if it falls into if it's a certain amount of money, then the trend, you'll be able to develop a trend off of that. So just like mapping, mapping and graphing, we'll be able to build a trend if you figure out where we're going. And if it's, we don't know if it's going to be a steep ramp, a flat ramp, whatever it may be, we'll be able to know. So come September, October, we'll be back with you again, with all of us, and we'll have all that data, and we'll be fitting in. But until we know, we just need really that time to develop that graph or that ramp.
So, yeah, I just want to add to what Paul said. Really, what we based this on was, it was moderate. It's not, it's not a Cadillac. It's a, VW bus kind of a piece. But we really depended on the CFOs, the chief financial officers, Elizabeth Comfort, and those folks to really give us, from their perspective as financial managers, what the potential scenario will be for numbers. Again, they took a moderate approach. If the numbers could be better, and as far as who's going to be taking a look at that, it will be our finance folks. Am I correct, Paul? I think so. That's basically.
So just let me make sure I understand. Is it okay, Chair Smith, if I continue to ask some questions?
Yes, continue.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So your proposal is for potential advance from Metro of 3 million and a potential inter-fund transfer from us for 1 million. And then I'm assuming, so correct me if I'm wrong, we have about 8 million that we currently dedicate towards homeless services, and so we're going to make sure that we don't have interruptions in services with the money that we have been allocating towards homeless services.
Okay, well, you said a lot there, so let me just see if I can't bring that all and parse them out one by one. So, we looked at the cash flow needs in order to do the payroll and roll out the they did. I didn't. They did.
Right.
So we're taking staff's advice on that, what they need. So we just figured out a way to meet the financial needs, not the programming. I don't know that. I don't profess to know that. We didn't get into that. But we started off with, what do you need? I'm going to go back to my very first statement. What do they need? So those details, okay, and what the startup is covered in the packet today, it's somewhat. And then if we can get more, they'll be able to do more, right? More revenue, we'll be able to do more revenue. So as far as the program specifics, don't have the answer to that. I don't know if there's going to be, like you said, a transfer of 1 million. I think that's like a reserve,
Right, but it's just
so as needed.
Right.
So I think even the advance might be taken we might take it all at once, but it'll be fed in as needed, but that'll get us to the point of September, October, and then if it's looking good, then they'll proceed probably on increasing staff levels. Perhaps we'll know more when we have that.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I mean, this is a way to get us started. The one piece I didn't want us to lose sight of is there's about 4 million, more than 4 million of COVID-related placements in shelter right now. And so I was wondering if you guys looked at borrowing from ARPA for that specific COVID-related purpose.
We did not because of legal counsel's advice that it doesn't look like you can, and we're waiting for guidance from them on that. because it seemed to be that it would be eligible, but it also seemed to be that it would have to be, as Mr. Madcore indicated weeks ago during the budget, that it would have to be, they would need to apply, each individual resident would need to apply for that relief, if you will.
Well, this is different. That's for rent assistance.
Yeah.
This would be for the people that are currently sheltered on vouchers.
Got it.
Because of COVID.
Yeah.
It's COVID placements, people that were
Yeah,
placed that way.
if that turns out to be new revenue, right, and it's eligible and it's new revenue, then that could be somewhat of, I won't say a game changer, but that could influence and assist if that turns out to be something we can use it for.
Yeah,
But
what I would-
staff has told us, Commissioner Fisher, that we're waiting for that guidance
Okay.
from.
Because I would like to suggest that if we can do that, that we do, but that we don't do, that we pay it back to ARPA. Because we have, 36 million? If we are able to fund those current COVID shelter beds with ARPA, but I want that paid back with the revenue from the homeless services measure for other relief.
Yeah.
If we could get that in the record. I just really want to thank you guys for all your hard work. I do know, because I have been talking to different people, there's a real concern from people in the community about implementing the local implementation plan. And in my mind, a lot of it is about risk. And I know that Multnomah County and Washington County took on the risk of, are we going to get this money or not? They're taking that on, they're funding it themselves. I agree with my colleagues. I'm not real comfortable with doing that. I would have been okay with it if I had more certainty that it was going to be, the money was going to be between 24 million and 39 million. I would be, okay, I can probably take that risk. But when the delta is between 14 million and 39 million, it's just not something that I feel comfortable with. But I'm all about, if any other entities, like if the healthcare industry wants to share the risk with us and advance us dollars to help us move faster, I'm all for that, or any other private entity or any other governmental jurisdiction. If other folks want to join us, but we cannot take on all the risk at this time, because it's just not prudent to do so with the projections of the way that they are. That I am making an assumption that the auditor's report is the projection. Gary, do you know that? I cannot get the answer to that question.
Don't know.
Talking about the Metro Auditor's report?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so-
would love to know that.
Yeah, and again, that's something that I tried to drill into myself. And so let me just say that my takeaway after all of this is that whether it's 14, 24, 32 million, whatever that may be, I would say that is something that you'll see the base year, what I see as the base year will be July of 22 to July of 23. That'll be the base year. This year is the ramp-up year. I don't think we're going to hit those numbers, those big numbers, the first year. So I would make that distinction, that this year is not the base year. It'd be the next fiscal year. But we did ask Mr. Madcore, and he was sitting right there, as a matter of fact, when we asked him about the ARPA money.
We looked at that.
Could we use it for that purpose, or could we borrow? And his advice and memo, I think at that time said,
Right.
no, not yet.
Well, the question is, because there are rents, or not rents, shelter being paid for COVID relief dollars because it was COVID related, could we continue those with a loan from the ARPA funds?
It's going to be difficult for you to justify that when we're lifting everything tomorrow. What's the COVID-related?
Because they went into shelter from being homeless from COVID, with COVID relief dollars.
Is this
It might be
hypothetical or is
difficult,
this
yeah.
real life?
What was that?
Is this hypothetical or is this
No,
real life?
this is real life. We are funding, to the tune of $4 million, I believe. Is there, and maybe Ed he's here, maybe he could clarify that.
Is the question, excuse me, a point of clarification, Commissioner Fisher, is the question you're asking, can we use ARPA money, either supplant them, borrow, whatever term we want to use, for the failed SHS funding? Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking if that can be the bridge until we get the dollars, because the original placement of those people were with CARES dollars. It's about a 4 million, it's a little bit more than 4 million that is currently allocated.
So I'm not sure where the $4 million is coming from, but if this is the funding that I'm thinking about, it's FEMA funding. And as long as there's a state declaration, which there still is, even past tomorrow, because from what I understand, the governor's declaration is going into what basically we did. It's still emergency declaration, but it's still around recovery. And as long as we have that declaration, which we can have, I'm hoping to have confirmation on this by Thursday morning, we have that FEMA funding still available to us. So there's not a gap if we still have this FEMA funding, which is my expectation. If there's other COVID funding, I'm not sure I know about. But I don't know, Ed, if you're aware of others funding. There's some COVID funding, but it goes through like next year.
Yeah, there's this ESG COVID dollars, around 900,000, and that's it, besides the dollars that Nancy just spoke to.
Yeah, it was presented when we first started discussing this about what is absolutely essential or what would be lost. And there was the Metro through Kaiser, those dollars, which were substantial, and then also the people that were vouchered through.
Oh, there's expenses associated with those individuals, and dollars have changed over time in terms of the hotel model, where at one time it cost more, and Commissioner Savas had said this is a very expensive model.
It is a very expensive.
And then over time, the staff put their heads together and worked on a rehousing plan, rapid rehousing plan, so that they could transition these individuals from hotels into permanent housing. But in terms of the dollars, I know that on the revenue side, it's just $900,000 that can be used.
Okay, we can talk about this offline because we're going to keep continuing to talk about this. But if there are, because I'm pretty sure there are people that received shelter based on COVID relief dollars, and if we could at all use whatever recovery method that is to continue those will free up dollars so that we can ramp up things more efficiently, minimizes risk, and can allow us to do that.
Commissioner, we circulated a memo on the use of CARES dollars as well as the use of ARPA dollars, and I think that one of the points of the memo was we need to know more about what the program is that you're trying to fund or bridge fund prior to opining on it. And the number doesn't matter, it's what's the purpose of these dollars and what are you doing with it to justify use under ARPA. There was the other question also of whether we would be able to reimburse, whether the Metro folks would say that that is a proper use for these particular dollars as well. So we had two kind of limitations in somebody else's control, Congress's control and in the Metro Council's control. So we'd be happy to explore it further once we know what it is specifically we're funding, what projects and programs we're trying to fund.
So you're saying you need to be extremely specific?
Absolutely.
Not just a bridge funding for the overall SHS. Okay, I understand that.
Correct, yeah.
Well, I think the most prudent action that we can take is to protect our general fund and our financial sovereignty, and that is we don't spend any money that we don't have. And I think that Commissioner Savas and Commissioner Schrader have done that, have put together, a recommendation for this board, at which time I will entertain a motion to approve option 1.
I move that we accept option 1.
Okay.
Second?
Second, the motion has been made by Commissioner Fisher and seconded by Commissioner Savas. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, Shannon, would you take the poll, please?
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, commissioners, for some very important and time-consuming work on everybody and staff as well. Gary, what's up next?
Next, the same topic. This is a revenue agreement between Metro and Clackamas County for supportive housing services funding. There's a draft IGA in your packet. This is the short-term IGA, not the long-term IGA, which is not done yet. It looks like Andrew Naylor's presenting for County Council. Go ahead, Andrew.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I will keep this brief. We've discussed this a little bit previously, but this is basically the stopgap IGA. This is getting us through until the larger IGA is negotiated. This agreement will potentially last till October 1st. We all hope it doesn't. The goal is to get the larger IGA negotiated as quickly as possible, but this allows the county to start receiving funds as of July 1st. I'm happy to answer any questions about the agreement if any of the commissioners have any questions. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. Multnomah County and Washington County have both signed. I believe Metro signed this afternoon. It was on their agenda, as I understand it. So it's been this one has been smooth sailing. This was fairly non-objectionable. It's the larger one that is obviously causing more consternation.
Andrew, do we know how much money is coming into us as of July 1st?
I do not know, but I believe Commissioner Savas mentioned.
It's $150,000.
$150,000. Thank you very much for that. Please be careful not to spend it all in one place. Okay. Do we have any other comments on this?
I just wanted to say I appreciate the work on this. It's unfortunate we don't have the full IGA before us, but based on what we just voted on that, this is imperative that we get this passed today.
Commissioner Savas, I'll accept your motion.
I move we approve the IGA.
Second?
The motion is made by Commissioner Savas and seconded by Commissioner Schrader. Any other comments or questions on this motion? Seeing none, Shannon, please take the poll.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, staff.
So Stephen, does this count, or does it have to go to the business meeting?
This is going to the business meeting, right? Under consent agenda?
That was the original plan, but
Yeah, let's do that.
We got it to this Thursday's
Yep.
business meeting,
Yes, please do.
under consent agenda. Okay, great. Thank you. That's the end of your policy sessions, but now we're back to the issues list, and the next item is the Economic Recovery Draft Resolution. There is an updated version that Emily will hand out to you right now based on feedback earlier today from Commissioner Savas and I think Commissioner Fisher. And Philip Mason Joyner, our Public Health Director, reviewed it as well. So Emily's about to distribute that. Thank you very much, Emily.
Is Philip Mason Joyner prepared to join us, or is he?
Yes, he's on this one.
Oh, great, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, Commissioners, take a look at this. I addressed the 10th whereas on page 1. Philip Mason Joyner recommended instead of using underlying conditions, and he can explain that if you like, to use the term immunocompromised. And we can question him on that. And on the therefore section, number 3 is stricken. Do we have any other comments or questions for anybody in the room on this?
Well, okay, so I get, my assumption here is that staff just worked on the health aspects of this and not on the now therefores.
Would you
question.
restate your question, Paul?
So the work that Philip did was based on the health aspects or the COVID-related aspects from the health department standpoint, but not on the now therefore, because we discussed everything under the now therefores. How many items are there here? 8. So we talked about number 2. I raised number 2 and saying, that it's almost, that's moot. So I believe it's moot, unless there's a rewrite, but it seems to me that state government is encouraged to, we've already done that, the governor's done that, so that's effective, at midnight tonight. So I don't necessarily see that that is valid, so I would recommend striking number 2 as well.
Would you like Philip to come forward, Paul? He's in the room.
Sure, I don't have a quarrel with that.
I don't have a problem with striking number 2, if you're ready to do that.
Okay. So he's decided to strike number 3.
And we already struck number 3. And the reason for this, it's an economic recovery looked at as a whole system, not just singling out certain business recovery. Because I don't believe we can have business recovery unless we have an entirety of the whole, and that's why daycares are listed in here. Daycares are an economic driver. Childcare is an economic driver to employment, and we can see that by our own county employees who, had to make a choice of whether to educate their children or come to work, and that's a very sad, sad place to be in. Philip, do you have any comments you care to make? Sorry to put
Good
you on the
afternoon.
spot without a direct question.
No, it's no problem. I'm like
Okay.
thinking about it. I did connect with Emily this afternoon. Did share just from the public health perspective. So if there's other lenses that you're looking for additional feedback, that is, I only focused on the public health perspective. And in the statement, I did go back and watch the video. That was very helpful to have context around this document. The statement around the underlying health conditions, I just, my feedback was that I felt it could be written with a little bit more clarity. I would hate for the public to interpret it, and I know that that is not the intent at all, but to interpret it that if you have an underlying health condition, you can't get vaccinated. That is not the case. So,
Is there any place in this document where you see that?
so the 10th whereas, whereas the vaccination rate will never be 100%, I do think, Chair Smith, your recommendation to have that be a sentence and stop there makes sense. Businesses requiring vaccination could be a barrier for access to employment. It seems as though there's multiple statements within one whereas statement, and I think that's where it was a little confusing.
Okay,
So,
say that again. And I apologize, I'm having trouble hearing you. So, in the 10th whereas, it has been modified to say, businesses requiring vaccinations could be a barrier to employment, especially for marginalized communities, the immunocompromised, and those who claim religious exemptions. What is the problem with that statement?
I did not see that copy, so yes, I think that is an improvement. Thank you.
That's an improvement. Okay, so you are okay with that?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
no worries.
So Chair Smith, I was thinking about this as I was driving during lunch hour, and I, putting my business hat on, the thing that came to mind, and I guess a good example is the airlines. I think in other businesses, what can businesses do to encourage people to patronize their businesses? And from talking to a lot of people, I think a lot of people are even nervous today, even though they've got their vaccine. They're concerned about their health, to go to a restaurant, to fly on a plane, to do all those things, to ride transit. There's a number of things. So I think businesses have done over the years, regardless of the emergency at hand or whatever it may be, or whatever the topic is nationally, to restore confidence as best they can and take all the measures they can to make their workplace or their business a safe place to be or a safe place to work, because they also need employees. So I think people are naturally, businesses especially, are naturally inclined to provide a safe workplace and project to the community that it's a safe place to patronize. So airlines are trying to do everything they could to get people back, and they put in restrictions in place. I'm not saying, I don't know all the technicalities. I haven't been on a plane since COVID. But I think that businesses are struggling to get their people back in the door, and I think whatever they can do to make that happen, they ought to have the liberty to do so.
I would agree with that. By the way, I have been flying a lot during COVID. And I have to say, airlines, I've often said, and I've held them up as an example. And if I think if Oregon would have taken the approach that airlines did in implementing the health protocols and a technology that's available to rid small places of the virus, I think we would have been much further ahead as other states have. Oregon is the last state in the union to come out of this. And I think that this economic recovery, post-pandemic resolution will help in that. I cannot, and nor can any commissioner here, address a person's fear. I cannot address their psychology. The only thing that we can do is lead our way out of this, and this is an economic proposal, an economic recovery resolution that acknowledges many, many things, and it acknowledges everything that our county has gone through. It acknowledges, I'm hoping, everybody will have something in this resolution they don't like, and everybody will have something that they like in it. And that's the way this resolution is designed. And I think it's very important that we go forward with this. In fact, I think that Clackamas County could be a leader in this economic recovery resolution. Instead of calling out things that aren't even doable, this is just a resolution. It has no force and effect of law. It is our opinion that we're presenting to our residents, is what it is. Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you. So I think the communication that's really important for us to make as we're in our recovery is that the vaccine is the most important tool that we have to fight COVID. It's the most effective, and we've seen the evidence of that as more people get vaccinated. Our hospitalization rates are going down, the COVID cases are going down, the death rates have gone down dramatically. So part of this, I think, is really important that we make that message. And it could be something as simple as, whereas the COVID-19 vaccine is widely available and is the most effective tool we have to prevent COVID-19 and its spread.
That would be under number 8.
Yeah.
So what it says right now is the COVID vaccine is available, and what you said.
And is the most effective tool we have to prevent COVID-19 and its spread.
Just a minute, effective tool available to prevent spread. Is that right?
Yeah, well, COVID-19 and
To
its spread.
prevent,
But it could be wordsmithed by someone else. But that's an important point that I think needs to be made in this, because that will help with the economic recovery. And then the other piece, the next whereas, it says, whereas many Oregonians may not have access to vaccines because of racial, economic, or geographic disparities. Philip could correct me if I'm wrong, but we have really broken down so many barriers to the point that we will go deliver the vaccine to anyone who wants it. We've delivered them out in the farms, we've held vaccine clinics, we deliver them in the language that people present to us. We have an equity plan that went to the state that allowed us to open up our economy. Am I wrong in thinking that it's not a barrier? We have broken that down. Anybody that wants a vaccine can get a vaccine in Clackamas County.
Certainly that's true. I do think there are barriers. People's trust of government, trust of organizations,
Oh, yeah, I'm not
trust
talking
of...
about that. I'm talking about racial, economic, or geographic barriers. I'm talking about those ones. I think people that are barriers that they will choose not to, but that is part of being an American and having freedom of choice, so.
but we have recognized many times on the number 9, we have recognized that those are barriers for us delivering the vaccine, and we've addressed those through our public health actions and our emergency management actions. And we had transportation barriers. We had geographic barriers. We certainly have hesitancy. And we frankly have people who just haven't got around to doing it. yeah, well, whatever, you know, there's some of that attitude out there too. And we've tried to really, I talked to somebody the other day who I was shocked, who lives in the Oregon City area and had trouble finding the vax, and this was just last week. And I said, well, go down to the Beaver Creek Clinic down here, and then here's the phone number. And it's available everywhere in pharmacies, and so some people just aren't thinking right. And we can't cover all those bases. Commissioner Schrader.
Just to finish that thought, so I would be in favor of removing that. And then I'm also curious, it says, whereas many Oregonians may not have access to the vaccines because of underlying conditions, I don't know that that's true either.
We changed that.
To the
We changed that to
immunocompromised.
immunocompromised.
Still on this.
Well, it's, she's talking about the one above it.
I would say that they don't utilize the vaccine because of vaccine hesitancy. I really think that is what,
It needs to be, I think it needs to be wordsmithed. I understand your point. It's not a matter that they don't have access, it's just that if they have a underlying condition, they have access to it, but it's not going to be advised by their doctor, let's say, if they have an underlying
well, if they're
condition.
immunocompromised, maybe we say that there, and then, and because of vaccine hesitancy. And that's a real concern. People are afraid of the vaccine, and they will not get it, and that is, but
So what do you want to do?
I would say that we remove, I say we could get rid of all that whole section.
Well, but you acknowledge vaccine hesitancy, so why do we want to get rid of it?
Well, then just say that. People, whereas many Oregonians will not get vaccinated because of vaccine hesitancy.
You could say is a barrier.
What was that, Martha?
I don't know how that helps us with economic recovery, however.
Because it is all these things together. It's an economic system.
Yeah,
It's an
okay.
economic system. You know, if somebody isn't getting the vaccine because of geography disparities, which I hope those are alleviated, although in Clackamas County, you know, we're still under the tri-county average of getting it. And,
Well, we could even say that whereas anyone in Clackamas County has access to the vaccine, because they could actually call if if there's any barrier. I mean, we had 1,000 doses delivered by community health nurses.
So that one whereas, I'm just looking at the language, the way it's worded, and.
which one number,
So
Paul?
the one above the one that was got the strikeout and the red
Okay, that
added,
would be number 9.
number 9. So I think what you really need to do to address those with if you want to address it for those underlying conditions, you need to strike it from that whereas and almost create another whereas, because the one below it is about businesses requiring, and the one above it is about Oregonians that don't
Correct.
have access. So if you want to cover people that can't get a vaccine because of medical reasons, underlying conditions, then you need to have a separate whereas to make it ring. So that'd be my recommendation if you want to include those with underlying conditions. Are you following that,
In
Philip?
number 9, yeah, I understand what you're
All right.
saying.
I think, you know, reviewing this, I think that this is foundational, these barriers. It's just a description of why are there barriers around folks accessing the vaccine, and I do feel like this list is appropriate. And yes, we've done great work, and I appreciate you listing the examples. But we've done that work because of, in our society, in the county, those barriers exist, and we've worked to break through them. But certainly there's more work to do, and that's why we've created this equity plan. That's why we're putting all these resources to these efforts, because these are significant barriers that are ongoing, not just for the COVID vaccine, but for how people access services in general. So I think it's important to keep it.
You would keep it?
I would keep it as is.
Because it's acknowledging that in fact there are still barriers in Clackamas County, and we may not know all the barriers, but at least if we're acknowledging the barriers to the vaccination, I think that's important. Martha, you here in the queue?
Do we want to put something in here? Not, I'm really going to monkey wrench this.
Yes, go
I'm gonna
ahead.
try not to here, but.
Go ahead.
Why don't we say something like, you know, you say everybody has a choice. Why don't we really say we encourage residents to receive the COVID-19 as available, and then have whereas many or however, but,
We acknowledge choice.
yeah, we acknowledge choice, but I think that we should encourage people. I mean, I met people the other day when I was handing out water who said, well, God would take care of them, and I kind of said, well, I think God wants you to be vaccinated, but that's my personal opinion. Okay, so, and I don't mean to be facetious about that, but I do think that we need to encourage people to get vaccinated.
Okay, so what about,
And if they don't, oh, so be it, you know? I mean, we're not telling them they have to get vaccinated, but I encourage people to get vaccinated. Does that
well,
make
I do
sense?
too. I pass out the phone numbers. I tell them
Yeah.
where to go. I say,
Yeah.
da-da-da-da-da. I say it's free. You know it's free, right? And I think maybe that was, in the beginning, that was a barrier. People thought they'd have to pay money.
Yeah, because you're still saying that that whole notion of requiring vaccines could be a barrier. But we're not saying no to vaccines, is what I want to.
So what if we say, to satisfy Commissioner Fisher and Commissioner Schrader in number 8, whereas taking the COVID vaccine is encouraged,
Is encouraged, okay.
is encouraged,
Or receiving a COVID vaccine is
of
encouraged.
receiving the COVID vaccine is encouraged for good public health.
For good public health. yeah.
How about that, for good public health? Just a minute, I'm writing this, good public health. And also acknowledge the vaccine is a choice. And also acknowledge
Okay.
that the vaccine is a choice, okay? And then we go down to number 9. We have not finished with number 9. And Paul, you were making a recommendation on
Yeah,
that.
I think I have an answer for that one.
Okay, good.
Okay, so I'm just going to, I'm going to strike out, well, I'm suggesting we strike out not have access. So if you strike that out and
Not
insert.
have access,
Yeah, and insert experience barriers.
okay.
So it would read, whereas many Oregonians may experience barriers to vaccines, barriers to access, well, maybe that's not right either, to vaccines because of racial, economic, da-da-da-da-da. So it's not about access, it's more about the barriers, which includes access.
Okay.
Something along those lines.
Yeah, whereas many Oregons may experience barriers to access,
Barriers to
access to vaccine
Right.
because of racial, economic, or geographic disparities, underlying conditions, or vaccine hesitancy. How does that read? Can I read that again?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good. I do think it would be good to acknowledge that Clackamas County is doing all it can to break down those barriers and to give everyone access.
And I think this acknowledges that we do have barriers.
Yeah.
We do.
Well, I agree totally. I just think that we don't want to just give up on that. We can say that anyone can have access to the vaccine.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that they don't have access, it's that, I don't know what the word is.
Barrier.
Barrier.
There might be certain barriers. I mean, people work crazy hours, you know, those kinds of things, and.
Yeah, and you know, Philip, we talked about that. You know, I think that you and the team identified a certain demographic that if we had the vaccine available, was it from 6 to 8 at night, for instance, in certain areas, that we would be more successful.
Right.
And you identified that.
Right.
I thought that was quite astute. And so, and that barrier probably still exists, I would think. Yeah. You know, it kind of fits in the category, oh, I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I'm healthy, I'm strong, da-da, you know what I mean? That type of thinking.
Yeah, well, then the biggest barrier is misinformation.
Oh.
That might be something that we want to include.
I think that's the story
Given
of
that
our
we were all
lives.
part, or I guess Chair Smith wasn't here, but the rest of us were part of a YouTube that it was removed for misinformation. That's something to put on your resume, that you were part of a YouTube presentation.
So I'm going to read for you here on number 8, the whereas number 8. The COVID vaccine is encouraged for good public health and also acknowledge that it is a choice. Number 8. Number 9, Whereas many Oregonians may experience barriers to access to the vaccine because of racial, economic, or geographic disparities, underlying conditions, or because of vaccine hesitancy. And then number 10 reads, whereas businesses requiring vaccines could be a barrier to employment, especially for marginalized communities, the immunocompromised, and those who claim religious exemptions.
And then on the therefores, we're striking number 2 and 3.
Go to the therefores. I was just waiting for a comment. Okay, therefores. So, Paul, you wanted to delete number 2, or do we want to try to wordsmith that?
I was thinking about just wholesaling delete 2 and 3.
Commissioners, any comments on that? Commissioner Scholl, any comments?
I agree, 2 and 3 need to go.
Do you?
Okay.
Okay. I can live with that.
The only thing I would suggest after we're done is that we have our gifted staff, English majors, just do a final grammatical check
Yeah,
for the
I'll-
language and make some adjustments where needed. I'm not an English major. Don't pretend
So
to
it
be
reads,
one.
right, I'm going to, after that we're done today, I will go into Emily's office, and she and I will go over that, and we'll have any other set of eyes that are available to meet those requirements. How's that, Paul?
Sounds good to me.
And Commissioner Fisher, you're in the queue?
Yeah, so just a couple things, and I'm not seeing it because you read it, and I'm a visual and auditory. I don't do well with just one or the other, is my learning style. But I am concerned about just underlying conditions related to access to the vaccine, because I think we've identified that's a very narrow population that doesn't have access because of underlying conditions. So that's my first concern. And then my second concern, and this can all be wordsmithed by other people, but I really think it's important, if we're going to say that people have barriers to access, that we qualify that with all that is available, because we have done so much and we continue to reach anyone and everyone that wants that vaccine.
What do you mean by all that is available? I don't understand that statement.
So there's a phone number that we can call if somebody lacks transportation. There are people available to troubleshoot. How do you get the vaccine? You can get vaccines at any pharmacy.
What's your recommended language?
I don't know if I have recommended language. It's-
Okay, I'm going to try it one more time. So I got another idea here. So let's change it to, whereas many Oregonians may experience barriers to vaccinations because of racial, so on, so on. So instead of saying vaccines, you say barriers to vaccinations. And that strikes the word access.
Okay, keep going, Paul. I'm going to write it down. Barriers to vaccinations.
Yeah. Many Oregonians may experience barriers to vaccinations because of, and then rest days.
Don't say barriers to access, barriers to vaccinations.
Barriers to vaccinations, I'm sorry. Barriers
And
to-
then what about a whereas, and Philip would have to write this, as far as what we are doing to combat those barriers?
Well, we have,
That would be in the therefores.
well, we have, what's not in here is, as of today, we have a, 66 whatever percent vaccination rate in the county. What is it today?
In the county, it's a little over 66%, over 66%.
Okay.
I think, Commissioner Fisher, the challenge is we're doing so much, perhaps pointing, I don't know if it's appropriate to point in the resolution to the equity plan we submitted that really describes everything we're
Yeah,
doing.
that's good. Let's
As
do
a
that.
reference.
Okay, what was that?
Clackamas County has developed an equity plan that addresses all of the barriers so that everyone has access to the vaccine.
Emily, you got that? Emily has that. Thank you. I didn't hear it completely, that's why I asked her.
I think faster than I can remember what I say.
That's dangerous.
It says, whereas Clackamas County has an equity plan. that addresses barriers so that everyone has access to the vaccine.
There you go. Yep.
Anything else on this, commissioners?
Looks good.
With that in mind, I think we'll bring it forward on Thursday. We will try to, Emily and I will work on this as when we recess and for today, and get it out to you folks as soon as we can.
Okay. Right.
Gary?
Your last item today is Commissioner Communications.
Okay, who wants to go first? Paul, you're up.
Well, we did a lot of communicating today, so I don't have much to say.
Thank you very much.
But I do have one clarification. Martha and I were talking during the little recess, a little break there, and she said something that made me think maybe I wasn't clear. So when I made the motion for staff to draft two,
A ban and
the advisory, that my thinking was that we're not going to do them both. We're going to do one of the two.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that,
It was one or the other. I wanted to get
All right.
perfectly clear. It wasn't that it would be do both.
My thought
I
was,
suppose we could do both.
my thought was we could do both.
Yeah, we could do both, but my thinking was it was one or the other, but that we were prepared for one or the other.
Staff loves this.
Gary, how do we distinguish between the two? I mean, I don't understand, see, I understand what you're saying, but sitting in the chair seat, I don't know how I do that.
I could
Do I
answer.
say, okay, commissioners, what do we want to do today? Do we want this one or do we want this one? And whoever gets in the queue first, we either vote it up or down. I don't know. See, when you do two things like that, I don't know what the will of the commission is going forward. I can't read your minds. Sorry about that.
Basically, you've not made a decision, so staff is preparing two options for you to pick one or the other on Thursday.
Bingo.
So,
Okay.
and let me just chime in. It could be that staff presents a resolution that has a public service announcement in it that is complete. And then there could be a separate resolution that also would call for a ban. And we could do both, or we could do one.
Yeah, and I think the way I got through that, what I verbalized earlier today was that that element would be in both as far as the public service announcement aspect and the advisory.
Okay.
So it would be embedded in both.
it's just a few more days.
Okay, well, and you know, things could change between now and Thursday. And I think you're acknowledging that.
That's right.
I am too, okay.
Maybe it will rain.
That's my
Maybe
public
it'll
com-
rain, is that what you said?
That is my commissioner comments for today.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Who wants to go next?
I just wanted just to let folks know, I was with AMR on Saturday with Mark Burnham and some other volunteers.
Can't hear you, Martha.
I said I was with AMR on Saturday, and we were going around the county handing out water to folks in his van. It was an AMR van, and we had volunteers.
Wow.
We went to a number of our parks. We went to the cooling station, we actually went to the Gladstone cooling station, went to where we thought people were gathering, a lot of folks in the parks by the water. Went to High Rocks. So
I
that's it.
understand that people have been calling AMR ambulances for transport to hospitals, and AMR, it's not covered by insurance and therefore may not be paid for. Is that correct? Did I read that right?
Oh, okay, that's all I have.
I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I saw. Commissioner Fisher, you're up.
So Metro Oversight Committee, there was a long presentation on data. There's a lot there. There's a lot of work happening regionally so that we get the correct numbers and so that we can get the correct outcomes, so that we can measure the effectiveness of the homeless services measure. And there's just a lot there. So more to come on that. But what I can leave you with is there's a lot of work to do and people are working really hard to do it. And then with the auditor's report, I think everybody has read that. That was discussed. I thought there were a lot of strengths in there, that it really defines what needs to be looked at moving forward, where some of the discrepancies were between what was passed and what was thought was going to be passed, and that's really laid out. I love auditors. Oh my gosh. I just thought that was wonderful. And so in regards to that, there's a lot of talk about, well, what is the cost going to be for the administrative costs? And the Metro Oversight Committee is does not take it easy on Metro at all. There were some really hard questions that were asked of Metro. Dan Fowler, who is our Dan Fowler from Clackamas County, is one of probably the most direct and holds no prisoners in the questions, and they're going back and looking at that. So definitely a fiery meeting. I'll keep you all apprised as we move forward. And if there's
And when you say administrative costs, you also mean costs of tax collection.
Yeah, that is the
That's a
cost of
biggie.
collecting the tax, and then there is the cost of, there's some data requirements that Metro is going to be facilitating and some other things, and like, what is all that going to cost? Because really, the goal is that the resources get to the people that need them.
Okay.
Can I add something? I had a thought, and I forgot all about it, but now you just triggered that, and that is, maybe we should be advocating that Metro stand down on that 5% return holdback for the first year until funds stabilize.
That's a thought.
That would kind of be
Because,
really
I think, we're all doing everything we can. They should just forego that until funds stabilize.
When's the next meeting to submit that idea?
I think it would the best avenue would be for Chair Smith, for you to talk about that with the chairs, because my role on the Metro Oversight Committee is literally to sit there and listen. I don't even get to talk.
We're not meeting this Monday because it's a holiday, but I can bring that up on the next call, Emily. We can do that.
See what they think.
Certainly, I can do that.
Yeah, and of course, if there is consensus on that, then all the minds, including
That's
the
a good
people writing the
idea.
IGA, need to know that as well.
Okay,
It's gonna
alrighty,
make their life a little bit more, just one more little thing to work
alrighty.
on.
Okay. Have you finished, Commissioner? Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Scholl, you're up. I don't have anything to say except thank you, commissioners, for putting in a long day and doing a lot of wonderful work. Very much appreciated, and we are adjourned.